This is the 13th day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Cities are being bombarded. Over 2 million people have fled the country. And a global energy crisis is looming over the world. Oil markets are already seeing the ripple effect of this war. On Monday, Brent crude touched $139 per barrel, reaching price levels not seen since 2008. Just to put these numbers in perspective, in December, oil prices were less than $70 a barrel. That's an almost 100% hike in the last 3 months. The prices of natural gas have also skyrocketed. The West is now considering sanctions on oil. The U.S. President Joe Biden spoke to the leaders of France, Germany and Britain. Washington is pushing for support for a ban, but Europe is on the fence because for the US and Europe, an oil embargo means completely different things. Washington imports around 8% of Russian crude and other refined products. But for countries like Germany, it is a completely different picture. As for Europe, it is heavily reliant on Russian natural gas, so any sanctions would mean a completely different scenario for the continent, far-reaching implications. Moscow has even said that a rejection of Russian oil would be catastrophic. It predicted that prices would double to $300 per barrel. If the oil ban goes ahead, Russia says it would cut oil supplies. It also threatened to close its main gas pipeline, Nord Stream 1, to Germany.
С необоснованными обвинениями в адрес России.
Due to unfounded accusations against Russia regarding the energy crisis in Europe and the imposition of a ban on Nord Stream 2, we have every right to take a mirror decision and impose an embargo on gas transportation through the Nord Stream 1 gas pipeline, which today is loaded at the maximum level of 100%. But so far, we have not made this decision.
Но пока мы этого решения не принимаем.
But despite pressure from the United States, such a ban is unlikely. And if Europe does not go ahead with it, Russia's counter threat also makes no sense. This is because Russia is making huge sums of money from its oil sale to Europe. Even the White House seems to be acknowledging this. Reports suggest that America may go ahead with its oil sanctions even without Europe's support. The White House says it is in conversation with large oil producers and suppliers on how to mitigate the impact if the ban does happen.
I would say this is one of the reasons that I gave the example of how much our capabilities and our capacities are very different, both because we import such a smaller percentage of oil from Russia than the Europeans do, but also because we have a much larger capacity for producing our own oil. So it is a very different circumstance, and certainly we are going to continue to consult with, continue to convey where our plans, where our discussions are here internally with the Europeans.
We told you that Europe is jittery about sanctioning oil, but it looks like this may turn into Putin's opportunity to divide the West. Russia is the world's largest producer of natural gas and the second top producer of crude oil. Over the years, Europe's energy reliance on Russia has become a crucial shield for the Russian president. Moscow provides almost 40% of Europe's energy supply. For Germany, that figure stands at over 50%. If this dries up, Italy and Germany will be especially vulnerable. Here's a graph to show you how dependent Germany is on Russia for gas. In December 2021, Russian pipeline gas was Germany's biggest supply source. For Berlin, losing this large chunk of gas imports could be detrimental. To compensate, it would require an increase in coal-fired generation at home or imports of power from its various neighbors. For Western Europe, Russia is its largest single supplier of gas. These are all the pipelines linking Europe and Russia. Should Russia choose to cut off supplies, it could lead to absolute chaos across the continent. Energy costs would skyrocket, millions would deal with power outages. The bigger question is, can Europe find a replacement? In the current situation, it's highly unlikely. It will be very hard to substitute Russian gas. Europe could import more liquefied natural gas from the US and ramp up its other energy resources, but doing so will not be quick or easy. A complete ban on Russian energy imports would drive Brent crude prices, pushing the Eurozone into its third recession since the start of the pandemic. There will be rising energy and fuel bills across the continent, something that Europe absolutely cannot afford right now. And to help us understand this better, with us on the broadcast is Matthew L. Wald from Washington, D.C. He is an energy expert and a former energy correspondent of the New York Times. And Dr. Mary from London. She is a senior research fellow and co-director of the Sussex Energy Group. Thanks very much for being here with us. As we've established the kind of split between Europe and the U.S. when it comes to these sanctions, let me ask you first for your reaction, Matthew, on how likely this ban is at this point, what the immediate consequences will be for the United States.
I think it's important to know that the vulnerability goes both ways. Russia needs hard currency cash. It does not export any substantial amount of manufactured goods. It exports commodities like oil. Mr. Putin's predecessor, the Soviet Union, collapsed when the price of oil collapsed. Russia is a dysfunctional family that will work as long as they have money. When they don't have money, they'll fall apart. I think a partial ban is highly likely. I think the German mindset has changed. Germany previously denied it was dependent. Now it realizes it is. Germany has been shutting its nuclear reactors, each of which is like a giant oil well or gas well. There's some talk that they may delay shutting down the last of them. Europe will eventually add more nuclear reactors, which will substitute for gas and oil in the production of electricity, will substitute for oil as the automobile and truck fleet becomes electrified. But you are correct, in the short term, the options are more limited.
Right. Dr. Murray, Europe keeps talking about cutting down reliance on Russian supplies. But what options does it really have at this point?
Well, like we know, Russia is one of the largest oil producers in the world, and more than half of their daily oil exports come to Europe. So it's about over 5 million barrels a day. So it's a lot. And like you mentioned before, about 40% of Europe's gas imports come from Russia. So it is a very large chunk. But we must not forget that Europe has been at the forefront of leading towards a Green Deal and putting in place into renewables. We must also remember that we have to think about energy efficiency and reducing demand. So just only focusing on, okay, we are reliant on Russian gas and we are reliant on Russian oil. We should really focus first on seeing where we can reduce demand and how we can actually move from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And countries like Germany are leading in that effort.
Right. Matthew, the White House says that it is in conversation with large oil producers and suppliers on how to mitigate the impact if such a ban does happen. What are the conversations that we are talking about? What attempts that can be made by the U.S. at this point to try and cut down the immediate consequences?
Well, some hydrocarbon production in the United States and elsewhere had been reduced because the price of oil was so low. As you pointed out, Brent was going for $65 a barrel in December. Now it's close to double that. Some of that shut-in production can be brought back. In addition, the market will adjust. If the price gets high enough, here in the Washington, D.C. area, gasoline is now more than $4 a gallon. Demand will fall off a little bit. So there's some slack capacity. There's some slack capacity within OPEC, but OPEC has now allied itself with Russia. So it's not clear how quickly or how willing OPEC will be to increase its production. But with prices this high, it will be really tempting for anybody with spare capacity to get it back online as soon as possible.
Right. Dr. Murray, Russia says that it would cut oil supplies if the ban goes ahead. It says it would shut its main gas pipeline, the Nord Stream 1, to Germany. What do you make of this threat?
Well, like Matthew said before, Russia also needs our money, and particularly now with the sanctions that a lot of countries have put in place, particularly countries in Europe. I think, it's going to be a very thin line of whether they actually want to lose more income in that sense. So I would really say that, the sanctions, let's see how they are going to be working. But I think we have already seen a massive impact from the sanctions. So whether Russia will actually do and cut off the oil, I think, it's difficult to say at this stage, but the sanctions definitely have started to affect the country already, and unfortunately affect the Russian population, many of whom have not chosen this war.
Right. Stay with me, Matthew and Dr. Murray. Let's also get our viewers a better sense of what the immediate implications of such a ban would be. If the U.S. goes ahead unilaterally with this ban, what will this mean for the oil markets? Russia accounts for nearly 8% of U.S. crude and refined products, so it is easier for Washington than for anybody else. But if it does go through, prices are set to rise across the country. U.S. gasoline prices averaged $4 per gallon on Monday, 47% higher than what they were last year. Experts say some of the price increase is due to self-sanctions, buyers that are avoiding purchases of Russian oil. How will the U.S. make up for the lost Russian oil? The West's retreat from Moscow is remaking the geopolitical landscape. The U.S. seems to be turning to three countries to compensate for this: Venezuela, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Senior U.S. officials reportedly traveled to Venezuela over the weekend. This was to meet with the government of Nicolas Maduro, the officials there. The South American country was once a top source of U.S. oil imports, but Washington halted imports in 2019 following sanctions. The invasion has also raised the stakes for a new nuclear deal, one that could potentially remove U.S. sanctions on Iran's petroleum sector. Of the two countries, only Iran is well positioned to quickly raise output. Venezuela's state of infrastructure has been under question already. But not just foreign policy, this will also affect the U.S. climate policy. In focus is the Build Back Better Act. The cornerstone of Biden's climate agenda is already struggling. Critics are saying that it highlights the need to reconsider the White House policies, such as the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline and the removal of drilling in Alaska. But environmentalists say the lesson is not the need for more domestic oil production, but more investments in electric vehicles and renewable energy. Matthew, some of the impact that we have already talked about is being seen already as far as the global economy and the global oil markets are concerned. What more do we expect over the next few days and weeks, according to you?
Well, oil is incredibly volatile. It always has been. It can get big price changes in reaction to small supply or demand changes. In addition, it's spring now in North America, and prices usually rise in the spring in anticipation of the summer driving season. So some of this is caused by international events. Some of it is the normal pattern. I don't know how high prices will go, but there will be a price response which will dampen demand slightly. There's another side to this, which I want to mention briefly. Russia needs Western oil companies to continue producing oil, and Western oil companies are walking away. Russia has never been very good at the advanced technology required for oil recovery. And now that we've got the big oil companies walking away from these investments, Russia has done itself long-term damage. There's a short-term problem in the West. There's a long-term problem in Russia.
Right. Dr. Murray, what is your assessment of the immediate impact that we could see in the coming days?
Well, of course, it's an unprecedented situation, and it's a very hard situation for many people. Particularly, for example, I'm based in the UK, so we've already seen an energy crisis here. Our wholesale gas prices have increased, and it's really been felt by many households who've seen their energy bills rise, who've seen their fuel bills rise. And as a result, we've seen a lot of increase in people who are actually living in energy poverty where they cannot afford to heat their homes. But having said that, I mean, it's going to have impact. And it's something that we all have to realize that it's going to have impact. And this is why I keep saying that we have to focus on things like energy efficiency, making sure that we first reduce demand as much as we can in all sectors, making sure that we are as efficient as we can in our energy consumption, and really starting to think about, how can we make more investment and quicker into renewable energy, because that ultimately will also mean better energy security for many countries. But there's no doubt that there will be impact, and it will be felt at many households, unfortunately.
Dr. Marianne Matthew, appreciate very much joining us on the broadcast and helping us understand the implications of such a move, if it does happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.